In this lesson, we will talk about how movement as a compositional principle can drive the attention, expectations, and emotions of a viewer. Okay, so I am here in 07_begin in our project files, and I'm just right there in the 6th principle we have here, movement, and I'm just right there on that first composition, movement 1. So with this composition open, I want to talk a little bit about what movement is. So movement is how objects are positioned to help lead the viewer in a specific direction. So really, this can be kind of a given in motion design. We expect there to be movement, but that doesn't mean that the movement should be arbitrary or really just not very well thought out. We need to put thought into the kinds of animations that we're going to create if we have a specific response or eye path that we want to drive our viewers towards. So let's talk a little bit about what I mean by this. So I'm starting out here with this picture of this parachuter. And a lot of times you'll be working with photographs and you need to create maybe some sort of slideshow. So you may scale this up or down and reposition it, almost like it would if you had just put it into some piece of software that would automatically do that for you. But have you ever noticed how whenever you plug things into that software, where it just will automatically create a slideshow with just kind of drifting pictures in it, it really begins to feel like it was not intentional. Sometimes you may start zooming in a place that really just isn't the focal point. So that's something we want to keep in mind. So I have this picture here and I've set up some keyframes just right here at the beginning. Then I'm going to drag my current time indicator there to the end, and we'll reposition this picture to kind of show where we want this to end up in the end so that we remain focused on this focal point of our parachuter. So I'm going to go ahead and scale this up a little bit, just maybe right about there. And then I'm going to move this down right about there. So this is still in the middle. Maybe scoot that over a little bit so we're still obeying the rule of thirds. We'll just have crossed it over into a new intersection of importance. Okay, so let's do a quick frame preview and see what this looks like. Now, I'm going to go back in there and change those keyframes to linear there, just so we don't feel like there's any kind of edge showing here on the end. And then I'll do another frame preview of that for you. Okay, so earlier, if you remember, I said we can use movement to drive the expectations of our viewer. And this picture is an especially good example. The expectation being that as the parachuter would come down, it would get bigger and closer to you. So keeping this in mind, that's how we would want to animate a picture like this. It wouldn't make any sense for us to have animated the picture to do this. Now let's watch this through. It forces your eye to move here in this direction, which is up and out of your composition. So that's just going to make it more likely for a person that's viewing your content to look at something else and to be distracted. This causes a lot of tension here along the edge of your picture. So that's really not what you want to do. You want to bring this back down so the important part of this picture is still able to be focused on. So keep that in mind when you're animating these types of pictures. Same thing goes for this image we have above here. It's a little bit of a different example, but we'll go ahead and take a look at that. So we have a picture here of two people, and I can't tell you how many times I've noticed whenever I'm doing one of those just kind of pre-keyed slideshows that it'll look almost something like this. Let me reposition these keyframes here. So we'll have our picture right there in the beginning. It starts off well, and then it'll zoom in and do something like this. So we watch that, and that just looks really strange. The people's heads begin to get cut off. Their eyes are off frame. Not what you are expecting. Now, it's not as obvious as the really just following that animation path that a parachute would have, but it just is common sense that you would want to reframe this so these people would just be taking up the frame at that point. So now we have something that looks like that. And if you have this issue here where when you change your keyframes up, you start getting these odd little curvy lines, you can simply select your position keyframes, right click, go to keyframe interpolation, or you can get to that through the animation menu as well. Then change your spatial interpolation to linear. And that's going to fix that just so that that's not kind of doing that little sway curvy thing you saw there. So obviously this is a lot better compositionally because we can see the focal point. So keeping that in mind, sometimes your movement can maybe get a little off when you're doing a lot of pictures or something like that. So you want to keep in mind that you're always emphasizing that focal point. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to our next example. This movement 2 is what I'm going to open up. And I just want to do a quick frame preview of what this animation looks like. Now, one of the first things you start to notice as you watch this is that those lines lead where your eye is going, and then the dots kind of create this landing place for where the line has hit. So pretty interesting, gives you some movement and gives you kind of just an idea of maybe this could be a video for a travel agency or just really anything that would want a topical view like this. Now, let's go ahead and look at our second example, movement 3. Okay, so right away, it feels like it's exactly the same composition, but let's do a quick frame preview so you can see the difference. Now, the only thing I've changed here is that the camera is following where that line moves. So you get a lot greater sense of urgency with a composition that moves in this way than in the last one. Same exact animation speed, same path. The only thing changing is that the camera is zoomed in, so we are emphasizing where that movement is taking us a lot more heavily than just kind of passively watching the line bounce around. You can't ignore now where the path of this line is going because it's always right in the middle of the viewer here. So keep that in mind whenever you want to create a sense of, wow, we're traveling around the globe really fast. This is going to be a much more effective means of doing that. So really any movement you have, the closer you are to something like this that's leading you around, it's going to feel a lot more urgent than something that's just kind of backed away and feels a lot more passive. Okay, so in this lesson, we learned that although movement is given in motion design, there are different ways we can manipulate this principle to change the feel of our video.